Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Whether you're here to refine your skills, learn new techniques, or simply build confidence in your communication, you are in the right place. Grammar isn't just about rules, it is a vital tool for making your ideas shine when you speak. We all have powerful, brilliant ideas, but without proper grammar, even the most compelling messages can lose their impact. Mastering grammar ensures that our ideas are clear, delivery is polished, and our audience connects with the message exactly as we intend. Today's session will be led by Solarzar Dellaporta. Solarzar has lived many lives in one. From his early Catholic school days as an honor student to living on the streets of East Coast during his teenage years to enlisting in the US Marine Corps and going through the enlisted to the officer ranks over a 21-year career to being a consultant and subject matter expert to the Department of Defense to and last but not the least, his 30-year journey in Toastmasters, serving as club, area, division, and district level. He's a speaker, an author, a master trainer, a magician, a retired Marine, a distinguished Toastmaster, and a perennial child. As an expert in grammar and communication, Solarzar will help you understand how to structure sentences effectively, avoid common grammatical pitfalls, and fine-tune your word choice for maximum clarity and confidence. This session is all about equipping you with practical tools to make your speeches grammatically sound and impactful. Over to you, Solarzar.
Well, thank you so much, Kashmira. I have to admit, I didn't know I was an expert in any of this, but thank you for inviting me. I was actually asked by Nitish, the Division C director, if I could actually give some tips about the use of language and in the preparation of speeches. And I actually reached out to Kashmira, who reached out to the clubs and gave me these areas that they specifically wanted to cover. The use of the present tense versus the past tense, how the meaning of a sentence changes based on the word that's emphasized, and using tone for motivation. Well, thank you for being here today. I have to leave, so I appreciate your time. I told you, 6:05, I'm out of here. All right, so let's look at the present tense. So the present tense is the form of a verb, the action word of the sentence that expresses the action that's happening now at the time of speaking. So the film starts every day at 5 p.m. So if I'm trying to say something happens now, I want the present tense. I write a poem every day. It's really a limerick, but you could call it a poem. I walk to the store. Those are all present tenses in the very simple level. The past tense is that same word used to describe an action that happened in the past. So when we take a look at that, we say the film started yesterday at 5 p.m. I'm talking about the past. I wrote a poem yesterday. I walked to the store yesterday. Now that's the simple present and past tense. But this is English, and we don't necessarily do things in a very natural way. So we start to get into something called irregular verbs. Now, the form of the past tense starts with regular or irregular verbs. How do you make a regular verb a past tense? You add an ed to the end of the word. For example, cook becomes cooked. If a verb ends in e, drop the e before adding ed. That's not verb, it should be. Yeah, it is verb. So you would do bathed becomes bathed. So anytime we see a cooked, a bathed, a shared, we're talking about something that's in the past. But if it's followed by a consonant, this is where we get tricky. A consonant is simply not a vowel. It's non-vowel sound. A, E, I, O, U are vowels, sometimes Y. So it's followed by a consonant. We double the consonant, add the ed, and pat becomes patted. And a consonant plus y, we replace the y with IED. Try becomes tried. Now, Sandia, are these some of the issues that you were looking for when you asked for the issue about past and present tense? So if there are other issues, this is a good time to bring them up before we go to irregular verbs.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think one thing we notice in our club is when we are writing, we are okay. But when we are giving speech without our own knowledge, we are going, not using the past and present, and we are mixing up. That's the issue.
Okay, well, let's talk about that before we go to irregular verbs, because the irregular verbs are going to take us a little different. So I'll come back to the screen. One of the issues is when we write formally. We write, for instance, Kashmira was sharing how someone learned English by reading books. We're going to tend to write more formally, but when we speak informally. We tend to speak in a more colloquial way, a more natural way. So one of the things that we can do is one, write out our speech. And I'm a firm believer in writing out the speech. Write out the speech and then say it out loud before you give it to the club. And realize that I don't speak that way. I write that way because it's formal. So when they say, for instance, in English, we can't use ain't, there's a lot of speeches I'll throw an ain't in there. Why? Because it's colloquial, it's catchy, and it doesn't matter and doesn't detract from the speech. But when we want to say our speech, we want to think, what are we trying to say and the way we're trying to say it, not how we wrote it. Does that make any sense to you, Sandia, or to the other members of your club who may want to ask questions?
Yeah, I'm okay. I don't know if anybody else have a question regarding this. Please feel free to ask.
Can you also give an example um, that can help explain the situation?
Oh, okay. Now I have to give an example. All right.
No. I was asking. I was asking.
No, I was pulling on you. But actually, I can give an example. Take something like Shakespeare. Shakespeare is written very formally. To thine own self be true. Well, I would never say to thine own self be true. I would say we should be true to ourselves. So that's how I would say it if we were talking. So we have to think about if you were sitting down across the table drinking coffee or tea with the other person, how would you say it to them? So is there a member of your club that maybe has an example they would like to share? And I'm open to that.
I feel vocabulary is also important. If we do not have enough vocabulary, simple sentence will not create the impact. That's why
Well,
maybe we use difficult sentences.
well, there was a time we all know, Abhijit Joshi, but there was a speech Abhijit kept going, and he couldn't pronounce one particular word in the speech. And I kept telling him, take the word out. Don't add a vocabulary word that either you have difficulty pronouncing or that is not natural for you. So if I suddenly try, I mean, my words when you listen to me are really not big words. I have a good vocabulary, but I'm trying to reach the common denominator of the audience. So I don't need big words to do that. I just need to find the right combination of words to make that impression. If I say, for example, I'll take something from my recent presentation. If I talk about leadership and I say leadership is a process, leadership is a journey of self, leadership is an evolution of spirit, leadership is an identification of who I am. I didn't use any complex words there except for the word leadership. And I repeated it, and they were simple, but I created a framework that actually makes it have a little bit more impact than just the one thing. So we can do that in our speaking without vocabulary words that are tough. And the only reason I say that, Lena, is because if it's not my usual way of speaking to use those words, I'm not saying I shouldn't try to increase my vocabulary, but I shouldn't try to increase my vocabulary just to increase my vocabulary, if that makes sense.
And one thing that comes to mind there, Solarzar, is also that sometimes if we use really large words where we could have used simple ones, we sound very pretentious. But that's not why I raised my hand. One challenge I find where non-native English speakers, what they do in their mind is they translate literally from what they are thinking in their native language to English, and that grammar does not match.
Right.
So I
And
don't know
it's,
how you can help with that, but that is a very common thing that I have seen.
well, there's something later in the presentation, but I'm going to touch this now since you brought it up. One of the things, especially a starting out speaker who's a non-native, tends to have a lot of ahs and ums and everything because they're translating up here, and they're trying to put it into the thing. So one thing we want to do, and we're going to talk about it more later, is slow down. So if Nitish is an expert in AI, but he's a non-native speaker and he has trouble with some of the vocabulary or getting it out, then he needs to say, instead of this much information, I'm going to put this much into my speech and I'm going to speak slower so that he actually gets it out more cleanly and clearly. Patricia Fripp, used to be a Toastmaster many years ago. She's a leading CEO, executive trainer in leadership and speaking in the country. But she says that we speak to be heard and understood. If I can't hear what you're saying, I don't know what the words are, and I can't understand you, then your speech is not going to resonate. It's not going to sink, no matter how well you put it together. So what we want to think about is pace, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. So anything else about tense before we go forward? Any questions? Okay, let's go back to irregular verbs, because I love everything in my life that's not regular. Now, irregular verbs, unfortunately, don't fit these rules of how to make a past tense. They don't follow a pattern. They can be formed in many different ways, and I'm going to give you some examples. You're not going to learn how to form irregular verbs from anything I do today, but what you can do is use the online dictionary. If I'm trying to say that this is present, but I want to talk about past, look it up in the dictionary. Make the dictionary your friend. For example, sing becomes sang. I sang yesterday when the police had me in the room with the light in my face and I ratted out everybody. But today I was singing real happy because they released me from jail. So sing is present. It's always present. Sang is what I did yesterday or the day before or this morning. Now you can look it up in a dictionary, best thing to do for the past tense conjugation, but you can do that even for regular verbs. If you want to say, I want to turn this into a sentence that talks about yesterday, here's how I want to do it. If I want to turn it into a sentence that talks about tomorrow, I didn't do any future in here, but here's how you can do it by looking it up in the dictionary. So here's an example of some present and past, like arise is arose in the past. Be is was. Begin, began. Break, broke. Choose, chose. So they don't follow the regular pattern. That's the only thing to know, that if it ends with a consonant, like we talked about earlier, it ends with a consonant followed by a single vowel, pat will become patted. If it has a consonant plus a Y, like try, it's going to become IED to make it past. And if it's a regular verb, we just add an ED to the end. Cook becomes cooked. And if it ends in an E, we drop the E and add ED. So bathe becomes bathed. So those are the simple rules, and you're going to get these slides to use as guides to allow yourself to go forward. Here's some more irregular verbs, like cost is interesting because cost is cost, present or past. Cut is cut. I cut yesterday, I cut today, I cut tomorrow. It doesn't really matter. Cut is cut. So we have to look those up. Do and did, drink, drank, eat, ate, fall, fell, fly, flew, freeze, froze, give, gave, go, went, no new, ring, rang, and see, saw. So when you're trying to do your present, think about what you're trying to say now. Look the verb up. The verb is the most critical element. And also know when we get to emphasis in a little bit, you also know what's the point of the sentence you're saying. Don't think of your paragraph when you're doing the speech. It's the sentence. Are you talking about me? Are you talking about someone else? Are you talking about something else? Are you talking about yourself? Know what you're talking about because that's also going to affect your verb, as we'll see in a little bit. So does the idea of irregular verbs at least make sense that we are crazy what we do with verbs in English? We have certain rules for regular and certain non-rules for irregular. They have their own rules. There's no consistency. Use a dictionary. I highly encourage that. I actually use a dictionary because I don't always know how to spell my name.
So I have a question here.
Yes, please.
How somebody differentiate a regular verb versus irregular verb? I see most of the newbies are basically with a lot of reading, you kind of figure out regular to irregular, you do it, but a newbie point of view, right? How do they figure out what is regular verb, what is irregular verb, and how do they kind of
Well, here's
manage to do it? Yeah.
good question, Venkat, and here's what I would recommend. First, you write down what your speech is, and then you look at your sentences. Am I talking now or am I talking past? And then based on the past, you know that you're going to have certain standard. You can add ed if it ends with a, you're going to add an extra consonant if it adds with a consonant, and it adds with, you'll add the ed. If it's a Y, you're going to add the IED. You're going to know those things because you're going to have these slides that tell you that. But if it doesn't fit that pattern, assume it's an irregular verb and look it up in the dictionary. That's all it is. You essentially look at what's the norm. It doesn't fit the norm, look it up. So is it cut and cut or is it sing and sang? The dictionary will tell you.
Hmm.
And I'm an anomaly. I write every speech. Do I memorize speeches? Absolutely not. Memorized speeches sound memorized. But I write every speech, and what I want to do is I want to say those speeches out loud because I want to hear how it sounds when I say it. Does it sound natural for me? Or even as Kashmira mentioned earlier, does it sound pretentious, like I'm trying to impress you with my vocabulary? It's good to have the right word to make the point you want to make. But if you have trouble saying that word, find a word that you can say that helps you make the point. So, and Kashmira, your hand is up. So
Yeah, and just I wanted to mention that sometimes the irregular verbs, they do fit a pattern. So for example, if you look at dust, the past tense is dusted, but cut is not cutted. So for things like that, there are tools. So if you run a if you're using Word for writing it, it's going to have a blue line and then you can do a check there. So anytime, like Solarzar said, definitely write it out and then run it through these tools that are going to help you. And if you see things like, but cut fits that pattern where it should have been cutted, why is it not? Then you can look up, do a Google search like, why is it not? And then you will definitely find an explanation. So use these tools for your benefit.
And plus, thank you, Kashmira, for that. One of the things I will mention is that in the last couple of years, also, I've been using Grammarly on my writing. I tend to be a very fast writer. Because I'm a fast writer, I leave things out. I leave out prepositions or adverbs or other things like that. Grammarly catches it. Now, I don't accept everything Grammarly says because some things I still want to say the way I want to say it. For instance, in my speech about leadership, my leadership magic, I have a phrase that says, we need to do in order to learn how to do. Grammarly hates that. It's so redundant. You're not supposed to say that. No, we need to do in order to be done. It's like, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. It needs to be a phrase that resonates with the ear. So it's not something you would necessarily write. But I use Grammarly a lot. You can get it free and you can also get it paid. But I use that to go through my grammar because I tend to be sloppy when I write. And so I need to fill in those gaps. It's a great tool. I love it. All right, anything else on that? We'll go forward from irregular verbs and try to get more regular. Let's try a little test. Who would like to try this one? I washed or wash my car every week.
I wash my car every week.
Very good. Wash your car every week. It's present. I wash it every week. Now, the next one's going to throw you a little bit. Who wants to try the next one? It's a little tricky. Come on, Venkat. This is yours.
Okay.
All right. So does Marion washed or washes her car every week?
You should be washes her car every week.
Right. Now, the reason this is tricky is that wash is a word also that is present. Washes is present tense,
Yeah.
but it's present tense when it refers to someone else. When it
Yes.
refers to you, it's wash. So Kashmira washes her car every week. I wash my car every week. I don't know about Kashmira, but I don't
wish.
exactly.
Is basically we are talking about a third party here, right? Not a I or
Yeah.
you. Then it goes
Yeah,
to the
exactly.
third. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but it is present tense as
Yeah.
opposed to past. It's not past. She
Yeah.
washes it every week. It's ongoing. It's continuous. I wash my car every week. It's ongoing. It's continuous. That's present tense. So you can also remember that when you're using the verbs, is if it's ongoing, it's present tense. If it's something that's no longer happening, it's past tense. So who would like to try the next one? Who's the brave volunteer? Monica, I can see
try.
your name. That could be your mistake. Somebody was speaking up. I didn't hear. Who was that?
Sandhya here. I can try.
Okay, Sandhya, great for you. So Priya walked or walks to work 3 days a week.
Walks to work 3 days a week.
Or if it was yesterday, she walked to work 3 days a week because she's no longer here. We don't actually know the context of this. I would have said walks with you, but this is also about what she used to do too. Do you understand what I'm saying, or did I confuse you?
Yeah, I think might be I need more clarity. I got lost.
Okay, no, you did well. You did right. That's why I have them both there. See, if I'm talking about Priya, who's right here, and she walks to work 3 days a week and she's ongoing, it's walks. If Priya used to work here and no longer works here, and Kashmira says, does anybody walk? Well, Priya walked to work 3 days a week because it's past. So
Right.
you were correct. Don't think you were wrong. But I did this one specifically to say it depends on the context. Is she doing it or did she do it?
You're right. Got
Yeah,
it.
so you were good.
Yeah,
One
thank
more. Who's next? Just one more. We don't. I'm going to pull it up.
There are a couple hands raised.
And, oh, Manoj. I see Manoj. Did I say that right, or is it Manoj?
Yeah, Manoj is fine. Yeah, both
Okay.
are fine.
Okay, Manoj, here you go.
Same thing, I think walked, walks both come into picture here,
Context.
depending on the
Excellent.
tense. Yeah.
Excellent. It's context. We could say, well, Abhijit walks to work every day, or he always walks to work. Or Abhijit, who's no longer here, walked to work every day, always walked to work every day. But we're going to have more things to give that context in there. But for this one, we can assume it's present tense, and it's good. So thank you for all of you volunteers to do that. That wasn't too tough. And I didn't do a whole lot of them because it just gets redundant. But it leads into, are there any questions before we move forward? All these quiet faces. All right.
All the Sandhyas are quiet.
Yeah. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about how to rebuild a carburetor. And we're just going to shift topics. So this is all about emphasis, or ways you can emphasize keywords. You could change your volume to speak louder or softer to make a word stand out when you're speaking. You don't have to worry about tense here as much as what do you want me to take away from your saying? So another challenge sometimes with with English as a second language is we tend to get a little rhythmic and sing-songy. So we want to start saying is, how do I get you to listen to this or to understand that this is softer? So pay attention to how you use volume, and your pitch. You can speak higher or lower. When Lena did her icebreaker speech for the contest in the fall, she used a lot of shifting of volumes to express her emotions as she went through these various experiences in her life. And so sometimes you say it faster or slower. When I do my leadership magic and I talk about humility, and I said, humility allows you can only learn at the pace you can learn. You can only do at the rate you can do. And it allows you to accept others at the pace where they are. So I start turning it into changing volume and pitch and choppiness to make the point, the little staccato rhythm. So change your pitch to speak higher or lower. Change your speed, as I was just demonstrating. Speak slower when saying the word you want to emphasize. And stretch out the vowel sound. Lengthen the vowel of the emphasized word to really stretch it. These are other ways to emphasize what you're saying as you're saying it. And pronounce not one, but pronounce one syllable louder than the other syllables, as if you want to say pronounce, syllable, louder, to try to emphasize those if appropriate. Now, don't do these just to do it, but it comes back to, once again, you've looked at your sentence, you said, here's my verb. Here's what I want you to get out of the sentence. I'll come back to you, Kashmir, in a second. Here's what I want you to get out of the sentence. How do I stress this to you? Do I change volume? Do I change pitch? Do I change speed? Do I stretch something out? Or do I pronounce one syllable louder? Yes, Kashmira, and then there's one other. Oh, Frisco.
I just wanted to make sure everyone knows what a syllable is. That's all I wanted to just kind of give an.
Oh, does everybody know what a syllable is? I'm sorry. Does silence mean no or silence means yes?
Maybe just give a very quick definition of what it is.
Okay. Let's do it this way. A syllable is words are broken up into parts. So a syllable, for instance, let's look at pronounce. There are two syllables here. One is pro, the other one is nounce. When you look it up in the dictionary, it always says which one should normally be emphasized for natural speaking. So if I wanted to, pronounce is not a good word to use for an emphasis, but if I want to emphasize one of the syllables, I can emphasize pro versus nounce. So instead of pronounce, which is just simple, I could say pronounce, or I could say pronounce because I want to emphasize the nounce. So the syllable are the different segments of the word. Syllable here breaks up, for instance, between the L's. Sil, la, actually bull. It's actually 3. So I could pronounce any of the syllables. Louder is 2. Other is 2. And so syllables are different aspects of the word. If you don't understand what a syllable is to pronounce one syllable louder than the other, don't try to do it. You don't have to. And maybe I shouldn't have put this in here because then, Kashmir, as you pointed out, that was an excellent point that it's not really what everybody understands. But are there other questions about syllables before we go to Frisco's question?
What comes to my mind as a very simple explanation is there is a single vowel in each syllable. So if you're looking at syllable itself, it's sil, that's one, and then able is another. So that's how we can break it up to figure out what the syllables are. Does that make sense?
Sure, that's a simple way of explaining it, sure. And so when you look it up in the dictionary, as I'm sure, let me stop the share for a minute. when you look it up in a dictionary, hold on. Okay, so let me come back, go to this share, and come here. Here's the word syllable in the dictionary. Can you see that? Now here are the syllables of syllable. Syllable. Those are the syllables. So when we say if you wanted to emphasize a syllable, you can decide, syllable is not the best word for this example, but you could decide if you want to do the la, or bull, that type of thing. So when you look up the word and you're looking up a verb or a word in the dictionary and you see the syllables, you could say, I really want to emphasize, for instance, the ed at the end of a verb. I really want to emphasize that I bathed as opposed to bathed, that type of thing. And you could decide to do that to create emphasis if you need to create emphasis for that. I hope that helps. Frisco.
Thank you, Solarzar. I wanted to add something when it comes to pitch, volume, and speed. According to my mom, I'm a native speaker. I don't know. I was very young at the time. But I've had a hearing loss for going on 20 years now. And particularly if you are speaking outside of your native language, you can almost always speak a little louder, a little slower, and a little lower pitch to help improve how your audience will hear you. And that helps with unfamiliar words. It's something I remember when I'm using other languages, which I try not to do because it's very hard to learn a new language when you're hearing impaired. But if you're ever in doubt, I would say slower and lower and louder are probably your friends. And when in doubt, practice on one of your fellow club members just to get an idea of how that's coming across, because we don't always, it sounds fine to us because we know what we're trying to say. So it never hurts to bounce something off another party and get some feedback before your main event or your main presentation.
Thanks, Frisco. And actually, we are going to talk about slower in a little bit as well. We had one more thing on this slide, which is to pause after the word being emphasized is spoken. So pause. When we spoke earlier, when you're doing also that translation in your head, pause. You don't need to say anything. Silence is fine. Pause. Then say the next word as it comes to you. And also because our sentence structure is different, sometimes even as Kashmira mentioned, when you're translating, you're trying to put it in the right order, and that always doesn't work. That's why when I mentioned earlier that I write every speech, then I say every speech that I've written, I read it out loud, and then I listen to, is that the way I talk? And I also think, for instance, and this is where those people using ChatGPT are missing it, in my opinion, completely. It's also, how do I know what my next point's going to be? So what is the mnemonic for me that reminds me of my next point? It has to be natural to me. So I need to write things not necessarily as I would if I were writing a paper for review by my peers. I need to write things so I know where I'm going next. And so remember to choose your words based on what makes sense, what you believe your audience will understand, and I'm going to say this, at the lowest common denominator. When Kashmira mentioned that I was in the Marine Corps, when I first entered the Marine Corps, I was in the infantry, and I was sent to the 2nd Marine Division, and the general in charge was General DeSilca. And at that point in time, I've never forgotten this. He had an interview in the base paper where he said, in the Marine Corps, we don't need educated Marines. If they have more than an 8th grade education, they're too much problem. We don't need people questioning why we need to charge that hill. Well, if you look at today's modern military, these are highly educated people. They have to be in order to function and do what they need to do. But my point is that if I were talking to a group of Marines back then, I'd have to talk to an 8th grade level. So consider your audience of what the most people in the audience would be able to understand by what you share. That's why, as we spoke earlier, simple words, direct words, but you can build them in a way that's still impactful. Let's try some of this emphasis. I'll show you this first one. This first one is, excuse me. Excuse me. The first one is, why, John? I'm asking John, why? Why, John? Why did we want to do this? Why did you say that? Why should we do this? Who'd like to try the next one? Remember, the bold is the emphasis. Try the emphasis. Anyone? I can't see everybody. That's part of my problem. I can't pick on people.
I can try.
Oh, Deepa, thank you so much. You ready for the next one? Now, look at it first, read it in your mind, say it there, and then say it out loud. We want you to put the emphasis where the bold is.
Why, John?
Right. Why, John? So the difference between the two is the first one, I'm asking John why. The second one, I'm saying, why John? Why is he part of this? So you see, the emphasis makes the difference of what we're trying to say. And once again, these are simple words. Thank you, Deepa, for doing that. That was excellent. So, Manini, you want to give one a shot?
Do you want to give me both the options, or do I have to read this one?
No, the number two. Number two.
Oh, okay. I would read how good.
How good. So Lena came in and said, boy, that was so good. And Manini said, how good. Speaking of Lena, you want to try the next one?
How good.
Yeah, how good. How good. You know, Nita said it was good. How good? You know, how good? I don't know. Maybe it's not good, but how good? But the first one makes you the real point of how good was it. The next one, how good? Maybe it's not good. The first one of John, number one, is we're asking John why. The second one, we're saying, why John? Let's try the next one.
No, but
who's
one question on this number two. What is the difference in basically, let's say, how good versus how good? So about what are we conveying, right? So how is that changing actually on the?
Okay, so the first one, when we're saying how good, we're really saying it's good, but how good is it? The next one, we're questioning whether it's good or not.
Okay.
So someone said it's good. How good?
The expressions change.
You know, it's
Mm.
yeah. Did that make sense?
Yep, thanks.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
All
Thank you.
right. Hey, Vincent, this next one's just calling out to you. Ready?
Yeah. Now can we go home?
No, say it again because you changed the words.
Oh. Now we can go home.
Yeah. So what this is saying is now we can go home. That's all. You know, we don't know what happened before, but now we can go home. Now, who wants to try the next one? Obviously, the emphasis is going to shift.
But in number 3, the home was also emphasized, right?
Yeah, now we can go home. Yeah, now we can go home. That's all.
Now we can go home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. On to the next one.
All
I think
right, you want to try it?
volunteered. Nagajyoti volunteered.
Oh, okay, no, I was about to ask why is there a question mark there with her? If that's a statement, it's not a question, right?
That's a question. Okay. Who wants to try it?
I can try.
Go ahead.
Now, sorry. Now we can go home.
Okay, so what's the difference between the first one and the second one? Anybody?
The first one is talking about the time that we can go home. The second one is talking about who all can, we the group has been divided into two pieces, and we say now we can go home.
Excellent. That's excellent. That's exactly it. So that's really the difference, the same words, but it's the difference of what we're trying to say. So, I did this before I asked anybody, so I'll just say it. She is unhappily married. It means she's not married happily. It's an unhappy marriage. Who wants to try the next one coming up?
I can try.
Okay.
She is unhappily married.
Oh, now try this again.
She is unhappily married.
Right. So that would be like Harry and I are out and we meet a woman and we like her and we say, oh, she is unhappily married. Therefore she's married, which is unhappy for us, but it has no reflection of her marriage. So do you see the difference?
Yes.
All right, two more. Who's ready? Da, 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 da.
I can try. It was the horse that won.
It was the horse that won. The horse that won. So that's pretty much saying it's not the jockey, it's not the trainer, it's not the owner, it's the horse that won. How about the reverse? Anyone? I'll do it. It was the horse that won. So pretty much that's Secretariat. That was the horse that won. It's just, that's the horse that won. Whereas the first one is describing the win to the horse. Does that make sense? Any questions about emphasis?
Yeah, the second one kind of says it was the horse that won, not the jockey, or emphasizing that it was the horse's quality, versus the first one is
No, the first one says the horse won. The
the
second one is just, oh, that horse won. It's kind of like that horse won.
okay.
Yeah.
Basically, the first one emphasizes that horse capability kind of thing, right? The horse is the
Yes.
thing which one.
The
The second one
capability was
says-
all the horse, not the jockey,
Yeah.
not the trainer, not the owner,
Yeah.
nobody. And the other one is just, Frisco's asking me which horse won. And I say, well, that's the horse that won.
Yep.
All right, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Solar, sir, I have a question. Could you give an example on stretch out the vowel sound? You had a point
Sure.
in.
Actually, you know what? I'll do that on the very next slide. I'll actually read the instructions on the next slide by stretching out vowel sounds. Okay?
Okay.
Or not stretching out, but stretching out consonants. So to further emphasize what you are saying, speak more slowly. Did that answer your question?
So this is for the stretch out the vowel sound.
Yeah, I'm just saying I read this stretching out.
Oh, okay.
So to further emphasize what you are saying, speak more slowly.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And vowels are truly the only things that can be stretched, right? We can't really.
Yeah, vowels. Yeah, you can't really stretch it. Yeah. Well, actually, you could stretch out a K sound or a D sound. You could actually stretch out different sounds. For instance, when you say what.
So the last consonant can be stretched,
Yes,
not
that's-
something.
Yes. Now, a key thing that's also important is that there's a tendency, especially we do it whether it's a second language or not, but there's a tendency to speak fast. The problem with speaking fast is making sure you're breathing. And you have to remember you can't breathe in when you're speaking out. So you have to pay attention to your breathing when you're speaking. So as you prepare your speech, you write out your verbs, you get your tense, you know which words you want to stress. Also pay attention to where you need to breathe. For instance, let me do this without a breath. To further emphasize what you're saying, speak more slowly, breath. Make sure you're breathing while you speak and not running out of breath. You hear me running out of breath because I'm trying to run out my breath versus breathe. I now paused. I also get a chance to breathe. Make sure you're breathing while you speak. Now I'm breathing and not running out of breath. You know, we speak as we breathe air in. We don't speak as we breathe air in, but we speak when we breathe air out. And we try to have enough breath for what we want to say. Now, I recently saw a professional speaker that stopped at a point in a sentence that I wouldn't have thought natural, but because they needed to take a breath. And it was actually okay. It's not long. So if I wanted to say breathe, that's not a long pause, but I'm breathing now. Make sure you're breathing while you speak and not running out of breath. I'm breathing with each of those pauses. So pay attention to that. As Frisco said earlier too, you're speaking slowly, you're speaking with maybe a lower pitch, but also make sure you're breathing. And then pause between sentences or thoughts to give the listener time to process the information, but also to give you time to translate. Does that make sense? And while speaking slowly helps your audience understand and engage, you really need to enunciate. You need to learn, when Lena was talking earlier about the words and the vocabulary, it's okay if we can enunciate the words, but if we can't enunciate the words, don't use them. Because people are going to get stuck in what you said, but not get the word for the meaning you're trying to project into the speech. So let's try a couple of enunciations. Harry, you want to give one a shot?
I need to.
I'll do the first one. I will do the first one. Buster Bug bites bad boys, but bypasses better behaved ones. Now, I can't say that fast. I have to say that specifically. I have to say Buster Bug bites bad boys, but bypasses better behaved ones. It's teaching my tongue and teeth where to go to say those words. So, Harry, you want to give it a shot? You can pass.
Oh, well, I'm game.
Okay, here you go.
Donnie Donkey digs dandelions and daisies in the dusty ditch for dinner.
Excellent. Now look at what Harry did. He slowed down. He slowed down to enunciate the words so you could hear the words. He may speak faster than that, but in order to get the words, he had to slow down. That's the purpose of these. Anyone want to give one a shot? How about Uday? You want to give one a shot?
Sure, yes.
Here you go.
Finny fish fiddles for fancy, food foolish folk feed him.
Excellent. Excellent. So when we're trying to enunciate, it forces us to slow down. That means we're trying to make sure the words are understood. I think I've got a bunch more, but we're not going to have time for all of them. How about one more? Does anybody want to give one a shot? Come on, Neetish. You're the leader. Lead us.
Sure. Gussie ghosts, glares, and giggling girls get goosebumps.
Excellent. See, now everybody who did it, what did they have to do? Like we said, they had to slow up. So if we're slowing up, we're enunciating the words and people can get them. And there's more in here, but we won't get to them. Here's some other ones I've added just for fun that you could play with later. A tutor who tooted a flute tried to teach two young tutors to toot. Said the tutor, is it harder to toot or to tutor two tutors to toot? So, and there's others. There's other. I put these in. Now, these are actually exercises that I went to with a speech teacher, to actually learn to enunciate better. Being from New York as I was, I had a tendency to swallow my words. So instead of saying a flea and a fly and a flew, it would be a flea and a fly and a flew, because I'm swallowing the last word. I'd be swallowing it. So this taught me to enunciate better. And you'll have these to play with. These will be fun things to play with. So that was it. So I wanted to also share one other thing that we sometimes forget, is that today's success is the result of good judgment. Good judgment is the result of experience, and experience is the result of bad judgment. What does that mean? Don't be afraid to try these things out. This is Toastmasters. We're the learning lab. This is where we practice these things to learn how to be better. And as I shared in another presentation on something else, is that we start out as a habit, a practice, and then a habit, and then it becomes second nature, and then all of a sudden it's something we automatically do. So if you practice some of these little tongue twister things to work on your enunciation, you'll find you'll enunciate words better automatically. Just play with them. You don't have to make it rigid. If you remember your breathing, if you take a look at, am I talking in the present or am I talking in the past? Then you can also determine which verb you need. And then based on that, what's the subject of your sentence? Who's it about? Is it about Sandia? Is it about Lena? Is it about Nitish? Is it about someone else? Is it about something else? And what do you want me to get out of that? What's that verb doing with that subject? What do you want me to get? That's where you put the emphasis. Slow, breathe, watch your tempo and tone, as Frisco said, and enunciate more effectively. And I hope that that is helpful to all of you. I do have one final thing before we go. I have an envelope, and in this envelope are 4 cards from a large deck of cards. They represent the queens. I'm going to clip it up here so you don't think I'm doing something sneaky. Because they represent the queens, I'm going to pull this one out. I'm going to pull this one out. Now, in a deck of cards, the cards could be either red or black. Manini, these two are the same color. Are they red or are they black?
Do I have to guess? Because I don't see anything. Is it just
Well, what
me?
do you think they are? What do you think they are? Are they red or are they black?
They are red.
They're red. Very good. That wasn't hard. So Kashmira, because they're red, that means we have the Queen of Diamonds and the Queen of Hearts. Which would you like to work with?
The hearts.
Queen, a woman who comes from the heart. So I'm going to place the Queen of Hearts face up in here. I'm going to push the Queen of Diamonds face down on top. So I started out by telling you I had an envelope with 4 cards. They represent the queens from a deck of cards because, after all, feminine is the creative energy in the universe, gentlemen. We gotta get used to it. Manini said that they were the red ones, which left us with the Queen of Hearts and Queen of Diamonds. And Kashmira said she wanted to use the Queen of Diamonds, Hearts rather. And I said I put the Queen of Hearts face up in this. Okay, we have to end the session right now, but no, let's open it up. Let's take a look. Here you can see we have cards that represent 4 large cards from a deck of cards. And I said we have a face-up Queen of Hearts, Now, you might think that that's a coincidence, but a couple of things you need to know. Queen of Hearts is the only one that has a red back, and she's actually the only one that has a face. So, what you need to remember is that whenever you speak, always remember to anticipate the needs of your audience and try to speak to them, not just from what you want to share. Back to you, Kashmira.
Thank you so much, Solarzar. That was amazing. Do we have a couple minutes for questions? If anybody has anything,
Yes, and the Toastmaster started.
Solarzar, you want to do more such sessions? It's not a question. It's beyond a question.
Yeah, that's a question I had also, Solarzar. I think it was an excellent discussion and I learned a lot. So if you have anything to share like this, it could be like a speech or it could be grammar or anything or your experience, right? The Toastmaster, being the Toastmaster for 30 years, we are willing to listen.
Well, that's very kind of you. If you had me too much, you'd get tired of me like my ex-wives. So.
Wife will get tired easily, okay, but we are not, okay.
Well, I also promised the slides, which are actually in the chat as well.